Right. And I never went into any of this thinking I had the capacity to or wanted to be a CEO. I didn't know that. It took me that direction. And some of that really coincides with this work, right? Conscious leadership and Enneagram and this spiritual foundation of it.
Hello, and welcome to this latest episode of Courageous Leaders Connected Teams. I'm your host, Stephanie Freeth, and I am so excited to have Aubrey Macfarlane here today. Aubrey's the president and CEO of Volunteers of America, Michigan. She is an incredible person. I've gotten to work with her for many years with Aubrey and her team members as well on both conscious leadership fundamentals as well as the Enneagram. So Aubrey, welcome. So excited to have you with me today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, honored, and so proud of you for doing this amazing podcast.
Thank you. Yeah. Aubrey and I have been through a lot through the pandemic, through her taking on this great leadership role. And so what we really want to do today is focus on Aubrey's story as a leader and what that has meant to her and some milestones along the way and learnings as well. And Aubrey leads and identifies with Enneagram Type 2, the Considerate helper. So we'll also be hearing from her how that shows up and how she's worked with her type structure in her leadership and in her life as well. So Aubrey, let's just dive in. Tell us a little bit about Volunteers of America, Michigan, and the mission of the organization.
Absolutely. So we are an organization that is here to help folks when they are most in need. What we really specialize in is this whole person care so that you can come to us and we will make sure we are addressing all of life's challenges to help people meet their goals. We meet them where they're at and help go along a journey with them to define their own success and help them to get there. And we do that through a line of veteran services. We provide substance use services, mental health services. We provide suicide prevention services, but we also provide a significant amount of housing support services. So we have services where veterans are living on site with us, and then we help them transition into permanency in the community. But we also have veterans that we're helping to support who might be jumping couch to couch or have a temporary placement, but overall really need a place to lay their head. And we help support them in doing that because the first thing we all need is an address, a safe place, a place to call home before we can start to address all of the other concerns we have or even progress on our goals and who we want to become in this world. And so Volunteers of America, Michigan is really here to help veterans do that. We additionally provide affordable housing. We have 11 affordable housing sites across the state. And in those spaces, we're serving seniors, families, or people with disabilities, again, with wraparound services to help them maintain that placement in the community. And we do all of that through the support of our Thrift work. Thrift is an amazing social enterprise where every dollar of profit that we have goes back to supporting the organization. So we are truly here to provide a haven of security and safeties to support people when they really need a hand up, not necessarily a handout.
Thank you for covering that. It's so deep and wide, and I've had the chance to be in one of the thrift stores and work with the thrift team, and it really is amazing to see that whole operation and the scale and the impact. And the veterans, supporting veterans is important to me. My birth father was actually a helicopter pilot in the Vietnam War. And he did not raise me. He experienced a lot of PTSD. He experienced a lot of trauma and is no longer in the world. But I think about it a lot, about maybe what could have happened for him if he had gotten more support for the trauma that he endured. So this mission hits close to home too.
Absolutely. And, I always say these are folks who have been willing to make the most ultimate sacrifice, right? They're willing to put their lives on the line for us and oftentimes return back and we say, okay, become a part of the community again. And they are coming from a place where they may have had to shoot guns. They may have not felt safe for days, months, years on end. And we ask them to come back and just kind of assimilate home. Well, home is very different than what they were trained to do. And so how do we come alongside veterans as they're struggling to say, in order to honor the work that you do, we need to walk alongside you. We are not providing them any support that they don't truly deserve for being out there willing to put their lives on the line for us.
So let's take a step back and talk about what really called you into leadership. You've had an interesting journey. Did you feel called along the way to be a leader? And what were some of those milestones for you?
You know, it was interesting. Even when I read this question and preparing for this, I thought, I don't know. I have no idea. Well, and then I started to break it apart and thought, oh, that's how that worked. So I am the oldest of 4 siblings, and we moved around every 2 to 3 years. My dad worked for Ford, and so we were in a new community all the time. And I did not realize at the time that that was breeding my ability or capability to be a leader. I needed to be a leader within my family as the oldest, right? And figure out how to assimilate into all of these new communities every 2 to 3 years. And so it built my grit and resiliency. I was incredibly shy. And so it was really, really challenging for me to have a new friend group, a new sports group every 2 to 3 years. But that's what did it, right? You almost get a chance also to reassess who you are before you move to the next spot. And if you wanted to do things differently, kind of adapt to that. And I didn't realize that I was doing that, right? I was a child, but I think that that's what first sparked my ability to lead. And so it became kind of this natural progression for me. I went to school at U of M, fully intent on being a vet. I mean, my path was planned. I was going to transfer to MSU after 3 years into the program there. And after going on an alternative spring break trip and working with Cuban refugees, my mom is from Cuba, I decided I was really called to social work. So I changed my major. I got engaged with an organization called Project Serve, now called Serve, at the University of Michigan, where I participated the first year and then started to lead the next year, then moved to the leadership team the following year. So again, just kept finding myself in places where I got to really expand my capacity to lead. And then, jobs were interesting. I took my first job at U of M. Then I went to a Ford Family Service and Learning Center when those were coming about, and I was at risk of a layoff. We were unionized, and I was, bottom of the list of the seniority. So I was at risk of losing my job. And so I looked for another one, and at that point in time, I ended up getting a job as a director of program services and quality at Judson Center. And it truly was a job where I could learn everything within the nonprofit industry. I could learn finances. I could learn program operations. I could build programs from new. I could bid on programs. We expanded when I was there from serving 5 counties to serving the whole state. And so just entrenching myself in that work, I kind of naturally rose again to this leadership position. And so then it started to become more purposeful. Like, I enjoyed this. I enjoyed being able to have an impact on organizations, be able to take in a lot of data and try and help support individuals in their own personal growth and development. So that's where I really solidified this idea that I liked being a leader and wanted to continue in leadership. And so then I continued to pursue my career, ended up moving to Boston to work for an amazing, huge organization out there, transitioned to a different organization to take my first jump into CEO. And then after transitioning back to Michigan, took a step down for a minute to kind of solidify my family here and decided it was time to go back into being in a CEO role. So after my experience at U of M, things became a little bit more purposeful as far as finding those roles that really met my leadership capacity.
I love hearing all the stepping stones along the way, because people often, they see CEO and they don't realize all the steps that it takes to get there and how it builds incrementally, and that you keep learning new schools and tapping into your passion as well.
Right. And I never went into any of this thinking I had the capacity to or wanted to be a CEO. I didn't know that, but my journey took me that direction. And some of that really coincides with this work, right? Conscious leadership and Enneagram and this spiritual foundation of it. I think about how to help my kids find their path, right? And so I go back to how did I find my path and what can I teach them? And so much of it was left up to faith and opportunity, right? Networking, putting yourself out there, figuring out your path based on who you know. But there was definitely some type of higher power guiding my journey in this world. And so when I look back and reflect, that's what hits me. It's like these steps that I thought I was going to lose my job. And then I ended up at Judson Center in this place that just helped to create the foundation of who I am as a CEO. What a blessing that really was in disguise in that point.
Beautiful. Yeah, sometimes our biggest obstacle points become that pivot point that prepares us for the next thing. And to feel that was guided by a force that's bigger than you is really special. And I've experienced that as well. So let's talk about so we've worked together on conscious leadership and Enneagram work for you personally and on the team as well. So what made you want to really embrace conscious leadership as the operating system for the culture really at Volunteers of America, Michigan?
So along that journey that I shared, I had a couple of really hard years where I turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism. And realized that it was creating a person that was functional in the workplace, not who I wanted to be and not who was genuine to who I was. So I decided to go into recovery and really worked hard, worked the 12 steps through Alcoholics Anonymous, worked on myself, tried to figure out, what drove me to use that as a coping mechanism. And through this work, I started to really like who I was. And then I thought, how do I take this person that I like and bring that into leadership? And at first I thought, I don't know that. And what I couldn't put my finger on at that point, that it was vulnerability, right? It was vulnerability and being completely 100% genuine and authentic. And I couldn't figure out how to take those traits into the workforce. And so I would try my best, come back to meetings, talk about how maybe I wasn't the person I wanted to be at a meeting at work. And then when I went to Gesher, got introduced to you, Stephanie, and introduced to the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership. And I thought, this is the translation. This is the translation, the perfect path written in a book of how I take those 12 steps and translate it to the workforce. They're so aligned in how but specifically the language talked about leading versus kind of how you are in your life. And so the language and the infrastructure gave me that ability to figure out how I can be that vulnerable, genuine, authentic person in the workplace. And I thought that there was so much value to this work in conscious leadership where it focuses on, if you can do these things, if you can try and create a culture that embraces this, you will create really productive, passionate teams. And that's what I wanted from it. I wanted people to develop personally and professionally in this space where we can be innovative and creative and vulnerable and not afraid to make mistakes and not afraid to be a team where we can say, I don't really like how that went. Something felt off. Let's talk about it again. So everything called me to do this work. We're doing a little bit of conscious leadership work. You introduced us to the Enneagram. And it was just another layer of a light bulb. Oh, that's why I respond to this in this way. The lens through which I see the world compared to how my colleagues see it. It's this epiphany that I know as a social worker, of course, that who I am and what created me in my childhood experience, it's influenced how I am in the workforce. But to be able to explore it in this way, that's deeply defined in research, but you can pick what you need for that day. Right? What is impacting you? So it all came together for me as this transition really from starting to like myself in recovery and who I was and transitioning that to how am I an executive leader that still can be genuine and authentic.
Beautiful. Thank you for touching on all those points. And so you identify with type 2, which is the considerate helper. And as you learned about the type structure, because we're all more than our type, the type keeps us safe, the type can become automatic, the type has blind spots. But what did you identify with in that type structure that helped you navigate and really helped you develop as a leader?
What was most striking to me was pairing that actually with the victim, villain, hero. And so as a 2, I'm a fixer. I'm a helper. We can do this. I'm your cheerleader. I'm your best buddy. I'm going to walk alongside you to figure out how to help support you. And in that, I can easily transition to this hero space where I become disempowering of the people that I'm trying to help. And it was devastating to realize that, right? My whole world, I have been promoted for being the helper, for taking on more than my 100% responsibility, right? That helper has served me really well in childhood and in my career. But where along the way has it not served me well, but also not served the people that I'm trying to help the most in a way that's really productive for their own personal growth and development? So that was my biggest challenge with learning that I was a 2 and trying to embrace what that would look like.
Yeah, sometimes when people first learn about the type structure, that each one of them has a core fear. And it's kind of like an iceberg. We've got these layers on the top that are our characteristics, our behaviors, but underneath the water is that core fear. And for a 2, it's that if I'm not helping people, I'm not worthwhile. And I have a similar one as a 3. If I'm not working, I'm not worthwhile. And a lot of times, we build these structures on top to keep us away from that core fear. And I find that as we turn towards that fear and face it head on and bring compassion to it, that's when we have a new ability to not be run by the fear itself as our blind spot. So I'm curious, as you've worked with that core fear, and because 2s can burn out, 2s can be so giving to other people that then they have a hard time recognizing, what do I need?
Yeah, the 2 type it's just exactly me. I do overgive. I do overgive into burnout. It takes me a long time, or has taken me a long time, to start to learn what the signals of that burnout even is. I used to say to people, I would always tell people, you can't give from an empty cup. But in my heart, I believed that I could. That my cup was empty, but I was still giving. So I would tell people, go refill your cup, but wouldn't ever heed that. And it leads to not feeling well. It leads to absolute exhaustion. It leads to certainly not being the person I want to be in the workplace or at home. And so that is my struggle. That is my struggle, figuring out what that burnout looks like, how to preemptively strike when that burnout is headed my way. It's a challenge. We've talked about how I feel energy really, really deeply. Like, I can feel the energy of the people in the office. I can feel the energy of the people that we're working with. And my immediate reaction to feeling any type of pain or fear or insecurity is to go in and try and fix that. But it does deflect from kind of that core fear, right? If I'm helping people, like you said, I'm giving back as I should, or I am worthy. And if I'm not helping people, or if I'm helping myself, I'm not worthy. Like, that doesn't fit into my value system as I initially structured it as a 2. And so I've had to rewire that thinking to say, how do I support myself in order to not give from an empty cup? And so I think that I'm not there yet, but I'm continuing to work on how to identify when I need a pause, when I need a rest, when I need a break, some time away, and what that looks like. What that looks like daily, when I might need some time to breathe or do yoga, and what that looks like in a year, when I need to make sure I have a vacation with my family or take a vacation with my husband. What does that need to look like?
Let's build on that, because that's so important, identifying that from within. What do I need? And also for 2s, I often see that boundaries are really important. So that movement from 2 to 8, and 8's the active controller, they're on the line together. What have you noticed? And you have access to your 8, it's your action style. So what have you noticed in that 2-8 influence in your life as you've set boundaries, as you've learned to advocate for yourself?
Yeah. So there's a piece of the 2 to 8 that I actively try not to do, which is when I get to a 2 point where I'm feeling resentment because I've helped so much, which initially I denied that I ever had that. But when I help so much that I get to resentment and then move to an 8, that's when that interaction is nasty, right? That's what I actively try to avoid. When that interaction is great is when that helper can actively trigger the 8 to say, let's be productive in this space and help to support that person to do whatever the task is or the project is on their own. So that is more of this initiator, this get it done mode that I have to have access in as a 2. Because if I sit only in the 2, I can overtalk things or sympathize with so much that we're not moving to someone so much we're not moving to productivity. So how do I then will access that 8 to come in and say, okay, this is how we're going to move along this path. And this is what that looks like. And it's taken me a while. Sometimes I'll say I'm a 2 in recovery, but really that is a 2 that's setting boundaries, right? A 2 that knows that a 2 without boundaries can be unhealthy for me and unhealthy for the people around me. So how do I make sure those boundaries are set And I know that when they're there, I access that 8 to be more concrete about what needs to happen.
Great. Thank you for those examples. Let's also move this to your team. So you've done a lot of work within yourself, which is so important as a leader, but you've also brought this to your team. How has this work shown up for your team? Because we have looked at all of your senior team. We've done the Enneagram assessments with him using the IQ9. And so we've mapped out those dynamics between the leadership team and then some other teams as well. But how do you use that on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis by knowing that Enneagram type of your team members? How are you using that?
It has been absolutely essential for defining how we function as a team. I will give you an example. We have a couple of people who are processors on our team. And so we know, do not have a meeting where you're initially bringing information to that meeting and asking for a decision at that meeting on the same topic, right? That's not effective. And then we aren't allowing folks to process so that we get to their zone of genius, right? Where they can contribute the best that they can in those meetings. And what it also helps us to do, it's been brilliant. It helps us to not make quick decisions because we have to make time for the processor, which also makes time for the people who are not processors to kind of the fast thinkers to rethink their ideas a little bit more. So we use it in how we send emails. We use it in how we operate meetings. It's become such a core function of who we are. We're also in this place of exorbitant growth. And we've got some ones on our team who are kind of those detail-oriented, compliance-focused, real thinkers. And then we have a 7 on our team who's more of that visionary initiator. Bringing folks with different types together during innovative program development has been absolutely essential because we are, like you describe it, we have that push and pull on the rubber band. That's absolutely essential. We have people saying, no, we can't do it because, and others saying, oh, yes, we can do it. And the truth is right there in the middle. And if we have these team identifiers, right, we know the lens through which people are looking at things, so we know who to bring to the table, right? I need to be pushed in this area, so I need to bring this group to the table to help figure this out. So it's opened up a lot of doors that we would say that we are functioning better as a team because we learn people's Enneagram types. But realistically, we're acting as a team how anybody should act as a team. The Enneagram has taken us to that space.
Wonderful. And in those challenging moments, having that map of you have precision around how that person is viewing the world. So knowing that is like a shortcut. It's like, okay, I know what this person can bring to the world, and also understanding the high side of the type and the low side of the type. When we get under stress, we can go to that low side of the type, and there can be an ideal of when we're fully in our zone of genius, we're in flow and we're accessing that. And as you notice people, going through different points, high side, low side, how do you accompany them as they reflect back to them what's happening that you're seeing as they're kind of transitioning dynamically sometimes?
Yeah. We use a lot of the resources that you've given us, frankly. Those are great starting points to start to talk about, like, this is what I'm seeing. I'm seeing you approach a project this way. I wonder if it's, that you're on the low side of this and can we push to move forward? We have language now where it's okay to have those conversations. They're not conversations that are challenging or insulting in any type of way. It's really challenges that we can say, this is the lens through which you're seeing this. Is there another way to look at this? This idea in conscious leadership about looking through things through the lens of curiosity has pushed our team so far, because I can say, what if you flipped? What if you started to do, or the opposite of, right? The opposite of my story is true. What if you're more curious in this space? What questions would you ask? What if the opposite of your story might be true? And that can help them toggle during different parts of their Enneagram style, right? So it's about that growth and development where we can have the conversations without feeling like someone's judging your decision making, rather trying to push to get us collectively to get to the right decision and to help someone grow professionally as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, curiosity is a big one. And as you talked about naming the opposite of the story, it really can expand. Like, can I just view this from another point of view? I might still have my preference and I think this is the way to go, but can we even have the mental flexibility to entertain other points of view. I find that on a team is really important.
Absolutely. We actually had a conversation this morning. We had the same conversation last year, and it was around salary increases. And last year, we were pretty closed to potential options, right, of what that could look like. We maybe put 2 on the table. And this year, we had a lot of what ifs. In fact, we tabled this discussion because we needed more time to talk about the number of what ifs that we put on the table. That's transformational, right? That is taking us from a leadership team where we're closed to ideas about the potential, just the potential. Again, you still might be really wed to the idea that we had 5 years ago that we're still implementing. But let's think about all of these potential options. And it was really fruitful. It was great to see the team come along and not be afraid of the what ifs, right? Because people know that when you say, oh, that sounds like a good idea, it doesn't mean that you're embracing the idea or committing to the idea. It just means, oh, someone put another option on the table. So then we create this space to talk about the options. And that's where this transformation happens within the team, because there's a nugget of genius in there. We have to be open enough to put all of the options on the table, even the ones that sound a little scary or maybe are not traditionally what we've done as an organization. We can progress if we're really willing to think completely outside of the box around what those ideas are. We don't commit to them. We just throw them on the table and then go from there.
And I'm hearing the application both of curiosity, but also commitment 1 from the 15 commitments of responsibility, and the idea that each person is bringing their 100% responsibility to the table. And it's not like just dividing up one pie and each person is dividing it up, but what's each person's 100%. And I'd be curious if how that plays out, how you see that playing out.
So as a 2, that 100% responsibility piece has been a struggle for me. And you and I have worked on the pie idea. And as a CEO, right? It's like, what is my 100% responsibility? Is it everything? And when you think of it of a pie with slices, there's no good answer to that, right? How big is my part of the pie? So when you helped me to see that the solution, and again, you had taught me this before, but I needed to hear it again, is that everybody has their own pie, that suddenly makes more sense. Because if you slice the pie, it implies that you can't have any more, right? You have to stay within that slice. If you have your whole pie, right, you might add a little more sugar, add a little more pumpkin, something like that. That has helped us tremendously as an organization, be able to say, what is your piece? And this bite might look the same as that bite, but we're working on it collectively.
That's great. Yeah. And also talk about going beyond that 100%. So, when you get into hero mode, what are your cues? Because when we get over our 100%, then we burn out and that kind of thing. So what's that been like as you've worked with hey, maybe 130% isn't what I'm going for?
Wow. So what's been great with doing this as a team, because I have a team that will tap me on the shoulder and say, not yours. An example, I was walking down the hallway with one of our vice presidents, and we were having a meeting coming up that I felt I hadn't been as supportive of the meeting as I has in the past, and I hadn't really done enough for the meeting. We're walking down the hallway, and I said, what can I help you with? How's it going? And she said, nothing, we're good. And I said, well, no, I feel like I haven't been involved in the meeting enough, and what can I do? I'm just like, we're okay. And where's this coming from? And they're like, well, I just haven't been a part of it. So I did my 100%, right? I was there. And had she needed more, she would have asked for more. But I'm trying to overspill right into her pie. And she looked at me and she said, I'm pretty sure this is a you thing, not a me one. And I looked at her and I said, this is a 2 thing. And so I have this team now that can say, you did your 100%. We've got this. Or back off a little bit, right? This is my space and I'm doing it and I'm doing well. I had another another instance of that, where another colleague that I was working with said, what is your concern about something? And the concern was my core concern, my fear of failure, which drives a lot of how I do things. We're doing a lot of new innovative program development. And I've hired on a COO after doing a lot of the initial business development. So what that includes is being a step away from what's currently happening, right? She's handling all of that beautifully and running all of this new program development with our vice president of healthcare, our vice president of social services, doing an amazing job. But as a step away from it, I have less information. And so my fear of failure started to really come up inside of me. And she said, but we've got it. We've got it. And here's all of the stuff that we're doing. And so that would have been a time where I would try to weasel my way into doing more than 100% because of that fear, when in reality, that fear is not justified, right? I have wonderful people who are amazingly talented doing their full 100%. And so all of that is happening. I need to let go of that fear that's caused by a lack of knowledge, but a lack of knowledge that is appropriate for a CEO. I know the main milestones are being hit. That's what I need to know. And I need to let the rest go and let go of that fear of failure.
So well said. And just having the safety for your team to give you feedback in the moment too. And that so you're all growing at that.
Yeah.
And I'll often say the inner game runs the outer game. When it's our inner work that then shows up externally. And how do you, I think some leaders think like, I don't have time to do this inner work stuff. I got quotas to hit. I've got revenue to fill. I don't have time for this. But what do you see as the benefit of when you personally, but also your team members are doing this inner work along the way, even as you're hitting these organizational goals and metrics and plans? What does that look like in reality?
I think the best descriptor is that everybody can breathe, right? Like, I think we often go to work expecting too much of ourselves, and not in the productivity of the work life, but we're expected to leave home at home, right? And show up as your work face. I don't think that that's a real thing. We bring our whole person to work every single day, and this work says the exact same information, right? We bring who we are to work every day, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever we're going through. And so doing that personal work is about how I show up for my team. It's essential work for me to be a good quality CEO. I have to be in touch with the energy that I'm presenting. I have to be in touch with how I'm showing up. And that means really being aware and doing that personal development and doing it in the places that it's really hard. But that is how I am going to show up and be the best leader for my team and leader for the organization. We want to make huge impacts as an organization and really help to change the healthcare industry. If we have goals that are that big, we have to be able to come in as our vulnerable, authentic selves to do the work. There are days that this work is really, really hard. There are days that we have to make really difficult decisions. There are days that the uncertainty of the political climate is tough on us. And so we have to be able to come in, take a breath, and figure out how we're going to handle it as a leadership team. But we don't have to come in with our shoulders high, with our guard up to figure out who's going to act like what in this space, or how are we going to act with each other and have discussions and handle these tough issues. It feels like a place where we can take a breath so that we can do the hard stuff. And it also feels like a place, we're getting to a place where we can make mistakes and come together and repair relationships, repair working groups, repair mistakes that we've made so that we don't make them again. So that's what it feels like when we're humming along, is a place where we can take a breath so that we can then do the good work.
That's beautifully said. And I'm picking up on the word breath. Like, you have been such an example of not just leading from your head, but leading from your heart, leading from your gut, being able to integrate those somatic body-based practices. So when you find yourself dysregulated, feeling stress, what are your practical tools that you're using maybe at your desk or at home? What have you found has been really transformative for you to stay centered and grounded?
Yeah, I think the breath is really big for me. The other piece that I learned in doing some of this work with you is to just physically reposition myself. And so I will use that a lot. If I'm in a meeting, I have a stand-up desk and I'm feeling something in my gut, or I usually feel it in my chest here. I'm feeling anxious. I'll adjust my position, stand up, right? Stand up and then take a breath. It's like my body recalibrates in that moment, and I can stay engaged in the meeting if I need to. And the other piece is sometimes taking a moment to walk away, not from a discussion or a heated argument, but just from the space, right? Sometimes I need a moment. Does that mean going outside and sitting down for a few minutes and catching my breath? Does that mean shutting my door to my office and just being unavailable to others for the moment? What I really want to do, and I'm going to commit to this now because then I'll do it because it was on a podcast. I want to bring my yoga mat into my office, because what I really would like to do and should be an essential part of my practice is just getting into a couple yoga poses when I'm feeling that tension. And so that is my commitment, and something I need to really employ at home and at work because I just sometimes need a space to decompress.
Yeah, those are great practices. And because I always want to give people practical tools, hear from others what their practices are. When you notice yourself going into hero mode, doing more than your 100%, what are your pattern interrupters? What are your practices to get you back to presence?
Oh gosh, such a good question. I'm getting there. I think my pattern interrupters are, sometimes it's the exhaustion, right? I feel the exhaustion and I know that I need to do something about it. I will feel myself getting a little crabby, and I know at that point that I need to do something different. And a lot of that time comes with decompressing and processing at night, right? So in the 12 steps, step 10 is really looking back at your day and seeing if there are any places you need to make amends. And sometimes in hero mode, it's looking back at my day and seeing where I took more than 100% of my responsibility, or where I potentially disempowered someone by something that I did with an effort of trying to help or under the guise of trying to help. And so I'll do that reflection to see if I've gotten into that mode where I'm taking on too much and really disempowering someone because of it.
Let's pick up on that word disempowering, because there's a pattern that we've talked about with twos called one up, one down. And I know this has been one it can be really tough for twos to grapple with. But the idea is that twos can make themselves better than or then less than. So it's like puffing themselves to be like they need my help. I have to help. They can't go forward if I'm not. Or then there can be comparison to be like, I'm not as good as this person. And it's kind of like a deflation. So it's this pattern of inflation and deflation, but it's rarely like right in the center. So how have you worked with, as you've had an awareness of that pattern, how have you worked with it? Where have you noticed it? And just curious to hear how you've really been working on that one.
Yeah, that one's a really tough one. I spend a lot of time in the two down space. Have done that all my life, have a lot of people on pedestals, don't think I'm good enough. We'll look at the folks around me and wonder how they got there and if I should have done something differently. So a lot of space in this two down. And then probably what happens is when I get to a certain level of insecurity, I go run to try to help people. I imagine that's my pattern. I struggle with this as a two. What I do know is that sometimes I hear myself saying, and this is, CEOs have insecurities too. And sometimes walking into a big room of whomever, let's say it's investors, can be intimidating. And so I do find myself in that two down space, trying to walk myself through, pumping myself up to walk into a room sometimes. And so that's how I see that come into play. Not necessarily to help them, right? But to trying to get my own confidence up. And then at work, I see myself when I hit that level of insecurity build up into, who needs help? I'm here. What can I do? What can I do? I need to do more, right? I need to fill this space. I've been at conferences for 2 weeks and not in the office. Who needs me? Who needs me? I'm back. And I think, there's a value in FaceTime, right? And getting out there and seeing what people need. But the driving force should be the FaceTime rather than the what do people need.
So one thing that I see play out with twos in terms of receiving, because sometimes twos feel like if I'm receiving help from others, I'm in that one down position. So it's not okay to open their hearts to let other people help them. How good are you at receiving and taking in the love, the support, all of that that you give so beautifully to others? What's your journey been like to receive that for yourself as well?
Still very tough. I don't love the accolades. I don't love definitely receiving help, and it's really difficult for me to ask for help. First is defining what I need, right? And I'm starting to get better at that part. But then once I have the need, actually expressing it, I'm working on it. My poor husband, mostly with him first, trying to define it and then trying to say exactly what it is that I'm asking for. But it's tough to define exactly what I need and ask for what that would look like. So still a work in progress.
Well, thank you for being honest about that, because I see that happen with a lot of twos. And I think it is also helpful to hear what people are going through and like, hey, I'm working on this. This is a work in progress and I'm aware of it.
Yeah. My team was so wonderful. And for the holidays, they gave me a gift. And I still think about how I wasn't gracious enough because I thought I was going to cry. And so I just said to them, I kind of brushed. I said, thank you. You all are amazing. I think you're great. But I felt in that moment, I couldn't hear they were giving me so much love. It was beautiful. And I couldn't do it because I was afraid that it was going to make me cry. And the truth is, it would have been fine if I had. That's an example that I still go back to. And that was in December of, like, do I need to talk to my team about that? Did I not thank them enough? Because it was hard. It was hard in the moment to accept so much. I mean, you could feel the energy of love in the room, and it was hard for me to feel that. It's hard for me to receive that from them, but extraordinarily grateful nonetheless.
So I ask each of my guests, what does courageous leadership look like to you? What's your definition of courageous leadership?
Yeah. Vulnerability and authenticity. Not being afraid to know that you are called to this and embrace who you are supposed to be in the workforce as a leader. Really, there's a piece of being connected spiritually to allow yourself to lead that, for me, is what drives me. And all of this work comes together for me under that guise.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I just want to open the space for, sometimes we'll use the exercise, if you really knew me, you would know that. Are there any other kind of leadership lessons or things that you feel called to share that might inspire others? Or if we really knew you, what else might we know?
I would say you'd never know that I would be in this type of role, right? This role doesn't come without being insecure in spaces. And so I would encourage folks to find your leader and be that person. It doesn't have to be as a CEO, but it certainly can be as a CEO. Don't sell yourself short. Find your path. Aggressively figure out who you are in this world and what your purpose and calling in this world is. Because when those worlds collide, you can really bring something special to the universe. So I would say, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid and let the paths guide you, right? My dad has always said to me, there's nothing wrong with opportunities, right? There's nothing wrong with opportunities coming your way, because that's when hard decisions happen. When there are two opportunities, what do you choose? Or do I leave, or do I stay, or do I go? When there are opportunities, it's a win-win game. So don't be afraid to explore a path that comes in front of you. Try it. Look at it. There's a reason why it came. Might as well take a couple steps down and figure out if you want to continue down the road or not.
I love that. Yeah, I do a lot of, sometimes college graduates will come and talk to me, or people earlier in their career, and I always talk about the role of contrast. It's like, hey, go try something out, like you just said, like go pursue that opportunity. If it doesn't work out, it's contrast. It's telling you, well, maybe I take this thing next. And so when you're always looking at something through the lens of what do I get to learn from this? It that state of curiosity and wonder, and even if it's a really tough thing, I often find that the tough thing I endured or the long-standing wound that I've worked to heal, those are sometimes the most pivotal, the most powerful, the things that help me connect to other people on a very human level. And we often can run away from those or not run towards them. But that whole idea around contrast, like I just got to learn something. So nothing's ever really a failure if we can take it from that viewpoint of what did I get to learn from this?
Right. What was the nugget of gold that came out of that? As bad as it was, as hard as it was, as great as it was, what did I learn? Yeah, very true.
And you're picking up on, I'll often say, what's the nugget of gold from below the line when we go look at the parts of us that get reactive. And it's like, hey, if I can't allow that villain persona from below the line to be really mad and enraged, I'm never going to be able to bring that challenger from above the line, from a place of curiosity, wonder, and growth, to have those boundaries, to make those hard decisions. So maybe you could just do an example of, as you've found those personas, that those parts of you that can feel reactive, particularly those villain parts, what's it been like to kind of transmute those, be able to work with them and integrate them so that you can use them in a different way from a state of curiosity?
It's been so powerful. So I really didn't have access to anger for a very, very long time. Or maybe I did, but I call it frustration or annoyance, right? But this thought that being angry or mad was okay was foreign to me. I didn't allow it in my life. And as a two, it was very comfortable not being there. And so I've just recently started to embrace this anger. And I think you've helped me see that sometimes the nugget in that anger is helping to move me from 2 to 8 because we need to get some movement on something. Feeling that has been difficult. Like, it's okay to be angry. And I've grown over time in how long I let myself be angry. You know, maybe it's 30 seconds in the beginning. And then over time, it's like I can let myself feel out this anger because there's something. There's a reason I'm upset. There's a reason I'm angry, a reason I'm mad. What's driving it? What is the force? Sometimes it goes back to my fear of failure. Sometimes there's a thing in the environment or in the process or in the meeting or in the workforce that's driving that anger that has to be addressed. And so taking that and saying, okay, now from a conscious leadership perspective, how do I address this issue that I've discovered?
I'm really glad you brought that up because anger is a tricky emotion. And I see that particularly with female CEOs and leaders that feel like it's not okay for me to be the angry one. And yet not being able to have access to use that anger as discernment, as an indicator of something here needs to change.
Yeah.
It really can cripple a leader without access to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think what I would like to do better with is when I find that anger, not letting it lead to resentment or frustration that then permeates, right? Being able to really reflect on it because it's a process. I've just started to be able to explore what it is. And so how do I now learn to be really productive around what that nugget of anger is in that villain mode?
Very well said. So we'll wrap up, but anything else you want to say to feel complete for today's conversation?
I'm just grateful for the work that you do with me and that you've done with the team, whether it's the individual leadership coaching or the group consultation that you do with us. Making conscious leadership our culture, we do very purposefully. And we do that with you. And so you really helped to transform our organization, and I couldn't be more grateful.
Thank you. I'm going to practice receiving, letting that molar over here, because that's been a growth edge for me as well as a 3 to be able to take that in. So I'm taking that in, and it's a pleasure to get to work with you, with your teammates. I love watching what you're doing in the world, and I'm just really grateful for you for coming on today, for sharing your story so beautifully, so vulnerably. And so our listeners can know, how can they find out more about Volunteers of America Michigan? Maybe there's some volunteer opportunities, or how could they connect with you through LinkedIn or other places?
We are on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. Our website is VOAMI, as in Volunteers of America, Michigan.org. Feel free, please, to go on there. There are many volunteer opportunities. You can come cook a meal in our kitchen and help serve those who serve the country for you. Multiple opportunities. You can do Adopt a Family. We're ramping up for Operation Backpack, where we help kids in schools get the access to backpacks and necessities. So please come take a look. There are plenty of opportunities. If you're in the market for a job, please look there. We're a great place to work, and we'll continue to be that and continue to serve our community just the best we can.
Amazing. And so for our listeners, if you have enjoyed today's episode, please give us a review. Please share with people who would be inspired by Aubrey's story. And we really appreciate your interest. Let us know what other topics you'd like to hear about. I'm always doing this work one-on-one with teams. And so if you're interested in finding out more about our Team Enneagram workshops, our one-on-one coaching, or our Discover Your Enneagram type for people who are just learning about the Enneagram, check us out at stephaniefreeth.com. Thanks for being here. Until next time, stay courageous, stay connected. See you again soon. Bye-bye.